The water is turbid, restless, and loud. Cargo ships move through the channel, their engines low and constant, churning the current into long, spreading wakes. Beneath them, the river carries silt and sound in equal measure. The river is crowded, it is busy, it is alive with movement. And yet, something is missing. Not hidden, not rare, gone. This is the Baiji, the Chinese river dolphin, the Yangtze River dolphin, the whitefin dolphin. Different names for the same animal, one now widely feared extinct. What survives is fragmentary. Much of the footage you are about to see is archival material, brief records captured before the species slipped from view. Rare, low quality, but invaluable. A handful of clips, a few preserved specimens, and the accounts of those who saw it when the river was quieter. The Baiji was the last representative of a lineage found nowhere else, a branch of the cetacean family tree that had persisted for millions of years, through shifting climates, changing rivers, and the rise and fall of ecosystems. Until recently, because within the span of a human lifetime, the conditions that shaped it began to change faster than it could respond. And now the river moves on without it. It is a bold claim to say that a single species was the last of its lineage. To understand what that means, we need to take a step back. The Baiji belong to the cetaceans, the group containing all whales, dolphins, and porpoises. Cetaceans are divided into two great branches. One is the Mystaceti, the baleen whales. Instead of teeth, they feed using plates of baleen that strain small prey from the water. This lineage includes giants such as the blue whale and the humpback whale. The other branch is the Odontoceti, the toothed whales. The name refers to their teeth, as that is an obvious difference from the baleen whales. But another hallmark of this lineage is echolocation, producing sounds and interpreting the returning echoes to navigate and hunt in darkness or murky water. Toothed whales include all dolphins and porpoises, as well as the sperm and beaked whales. And yes, dolphins are technically whales. The difference is in their body shape, not in their evolutionary relationships. The earliest branch of toothed whales leads to two closely related families, the sperm and dwarf sperm whales. The sperm whale is the largest toothed predator in the world, and is well known as the primary predator capable of feeding on adult giant and colossal squid. Next is the first of the river dolphins, Platanistidae, or the South Asian river dolphins. With just two species, they are only found in the Indian subcontinent, one in the Ganges River, the other in the Indus. What is interesting is that from there we return to a lineage of whales, Zephyridae, or the beaked whales. Most of the 24 species are poorly known and rarely seen. They prefer deep water, and one species, the Cuvier's beaked whale, even holds the record for deepest known dive of any mammal. From there, the toothed whales divide into two final groups. The first is Ineoidea, the South American river dolphins. Then, finally, is Delphinoidea, the superfamily containing the oceanic dolphins, the porpoises, and the belugas and narwhals. These are the dolphins you are most likely familiar with, orcas, bottlenose dolphins, and the like. But they are far more closely related to porpoises and narwhals than they are to any of the river dolphins. So there are two groups of river dolphins, the South Asian and the South American ones. And this is where the story gets interesting. The Baiji lived in the Yangtze River in China. By geography alone, you might expect it to belong with the South Asian river dolphins. It does not. Instead, its closest relatives were found across the Pacific in South America. Within Ineoidea, the Baiji was the sole modern member of the family Lepotidae. Its nearest surviving relatives were the Amazon river dolphins and the Franciscana, also known as the La Plata dolphin. There are between 1 and 4 species of Amazon river dolphins, depending on the classification. They are found throughout the Amazon River and its tributaries, and include the famous pink river dolphins. But it is the Franciscana that is especially revealing. Unlike the Baiji or Amazon river dolphins, it lives mainly in coastal waters and estuaries, rather than freshwater rivers. That tells us something important. Life in freshwater did not evolve once among river dolphins. It evolved at least twice, and probably more. The South Asian river dolphins descended from a different marine ancestor than the Baiji and its South American relatives. And even within the Baiji's own broader group, movement between sea, estuary, and river likely happened repeatedly over time. Some lineages travelled further inland, becoming specialized freshwater hunters, the Baiji and South American river dolphins. Others, like the Franciscana, remained tied to coasts and tidal waters. So the Baiji was not simply a dolphin in a river. It was the Yangtze representative of an ancient lineage whose relatives were scattered across another continent, and whose branch would end with its own disappearance. Evolution had placed the Baiji on an ancient and unusual branch of the whale family tree, but ancestry alone does not explain what it became. The Baiji was shaped by the Yangtze River itself. This was not the open ocean. It was a vast freshwater system of shifting channels, seasonal floods, sandbanks, submerged obstacles, and water often heavy with suspended sediment. Visibility could be poor. Conditions changed with depth, current, and season. To live here required a different set of tools. The Baiji's body was slender and streamlined, more delicate in appearance than many oceanic dolphins. Adults are thought to have reached around 2 to 2.5 meters in length, with females generally larger than males. Its most distinctive feature was its long, narrow beak. Lined with numerous teeth, it was well suited to seizing fish in confined waterways, where quick lateral movements and precise snaps of the jaw could matter more than brute force. Similar snouts evolved more than once. They appear in distantly related dolphins, such as the Indus and Ganges river dolphins, and even in unrelated groups, such as the gharials or the prehistoric ichthyosaurs. Different lineages, similar problem, similar solution. A classic example of convergent evolution. Its eyes were small, and vision was likely less important than it is for many marine dolphins. In the Yangtze, water often carried more sediment than light. Even at short distances, sight could be unreliable, so the Baiji perceived its world primarily through sound. Like other toothed whales, it produced rapid clicks and interpreted the returning echoes. A fish moving ahead, a sandbank below, a boat hull in the distance, the edge of a riverbank in murky water, all could be traced acoustically. To an animal like this, the river was not simply seen, it was heard. That was perhaps its greatest adaptation to freshwater life. But it was not the only one. Its neck was more flexible than most oceanic dolphins. In fast-moving or cluttered water, the ability to turn the head may have helped when navigating narrow channels or pursuing fish at close range. Even the coloration may have reflected its environment. The Baiji was typically blue-grey above and lighter below, a subdued pattern that blended into the muted tones of river water and reflected light. Everything about it suggests an animal built not for speed across open seas, but for precision in a complex river. It was a whale redesigned by freshwater life, and for thousands of years, the Yangtze was enough. It was not only an ecological presence, but a cultural one. Along parts of the river, the Baiji became known as the goddess of the Yangtze, a graceful, pale figure associated with the water itself, a goddess of protection, a symbol of peace and prosperity. Stories varied from place to place. One of the best known tells of a young woman who leapt into the river to escape her cruel guardian. A storm rose and sank the boat of her pursuer. When the waters calmed, a pale dolphin was seen swimming where she had vanished, the incarnation of the girl. Like many animal legends, the details matter less than what they reveal. This was a species people noticed, named, and remembered. The Baiji was never just another animal or passing shadow beneath the surface. It was part of the identity of the river. For most of the Baiji's history, the Yangtze River changed slowly. Channels shifted, floods came and receded, sandbanks formed and vanished. Seasons altered water levels, currents, and the movements of fish. But these were the rhythms of a living river. Forces the Baiji had lived alongside for thousands of generations. Then the pace began to quicken. As human populations grew along the Yangtze, the river became increasingly engineered, exploited and crowded. Settlements expanded into cities, shorelines were reinforced, wetlands were drained, traffic intensified. The Yangtze is more than a river. Its basin supports hundreds of millions of people, with roughly a third of China's population living within it or depending on its waters. The Baiji did not face one sudden catastrophe. It faced many smaller challenges, accumulating year after year. Fishing pressure increased throughout the basin. Nets became more widespread, and some methods became especially dangerous. Entanglements could injure or drown dolphins that surfaced to breathe. Depletion of fish stocks also meant greater competition for prey. Boat traffic brought a different threat. The Baiji relied heavily on sound to navigate turbid water, detect obstacles, and locate fish. But propellers, engines, and the constant passage of vessels transformed the river's soundscape. A world once read through echoes became increasingly masked by noise. Industrial growth added further strain. Pollution from factories, agriculture, and expanding settlements entered the watershed. Water quality declined in many areas, while shoreline development reduced or altered habitat used by fish and other river life. Large-scale engineering projects reshaped the river more directly still. Dams and channel modifications changed flow patterns, sediment movement, seasonal flooding, and the connectivity of habitats across the basin. What was once a continuous river became disjointed. Each pressure alone might have been survivable. Together, they acted on a species already restricted to a single river system. The Baiji could not move into neighbouring areas. It had no second population elsewhere, no marine refuge, no distant branch of the river where conditions remained untouched. Its entire world was the Yangtze, and the Yangtze was changing faster than at any point in its history. For most of its history, the Baiji had been a familiar part of the Yangtze River. It ranged through the middle and lower reaches of the river, surfacing in channels, lakes, and tributaries that had supported the species for countless generations. Then, within the span of a human lifetime, it became difficult to find. By the second half of the 20th century, sightings were becoming less common. Numbers had fallen sharply. Where the Baiji had once been scattered across a vast river system, only small and increasingly isolated groups were thought to remain. The decline was now visible. As concern grew, protection efforts began. Hunting was banned. The species received legal protection. Scientists proposed reserves, captive breeding programs, and the transfer of surviving animals into safer semi-natural habitats connected to the river. One of the most ambitious ideas was to move surviving Baiji into protected semi-natural waters away from the busiest shipping lanes and most dangerous fishing zones. Oxbow lakes connected to the Yangtze were considered potential refuges, places where remnant populations might recover under protection. Attempts were made, but time was running out. The Taina-Jo Oxbow Nature Reserve was first proposed in 1988 as a sanctuary for Baiji, but plans that may have helped decades earlier now faced a harsher reality. Too few animals could be found. Too little time remained. Finding individuals in the Yangtze was difficult, even when the species had been more common. Now each search covered a river that was longer, louder, busier, and more altered than ever before. One Baiji, an adult, later named Chi-Chi, was rescued after becoming entangled in fishing gear in 1980. He was transferred to captivity, where he lived for more than 2 decades. For many people, Chi-Chi became the face of the species. He was the Baiji seen in photographs, the Baiji filmed at close range, the only Baiji most of the world would ever know. But he could not save the lineage alone. Other rescue efforts struggled. Individuals were difficult to locate, difficult to capture safely, and too few remained to establish a secure breeding population. When Chi-Chi died in 2002, one of the last certain living Baiji was gone. Yet hope, however faint, remained in the river itself. In 2006, an international expedition surveyed the Yangtze intensively, across the species' historic range, searching for any surviving Baiji. None were found. There was no dramatic final moment, no confirmed last individual witnessed in the wild, no single day on which the species clearly ended. Only a survey returning empty. Today, the Baiji is widely regarded as functionally extinct. In conservation terms, that means the line between survival and disappearance has already been crossed. Even if 1 or 2 animals remain, there may be too few to recover, too isolated to breed, too late to rebuild the population. Yet, proving extinction is another matter entirely. Absence is difficult to demonstrate, especially in large or inaccessible habitats. If you'd like to explore that challenge in more depth, and why some species later reappear, I covered it in a recent episode linked below. The International Union for Conservation of Nature has continued to list the baiji as critically endangered, possibly extinct, rather than formally declaring it extinct, in a river as vast and complex as the Yangtze, demonstrating that no individual survive anywhere is extraordinarily difficult. Occasional unverified sightings have been reported, but no confirmed surviving population is known. If any remain, they persist beyond science's ability to find them. If none remain, then an entire branch of the whale family tree disappeared almost unnoticed, not in some distant prehistory, but in the modern age. The baiji is often described as a finished story, but the river inhabited is not. Even after the species collapse, scientists continued to argue for protected stretches of the Yangtze, fishing restrictions, quieter waterways, restored floodplains, and the recovery of side channels once cut off from the main flow. Partly, this was caution. If any baiji still survived undetected, they would need refuge. But it was also recognition that the same river supports life that remains. Among them is the Yangtze finless porpoise, another small cetacean found nowhere else except the Yangtze River system. Unlike the baiji, it lacks a dorsal fin, its rounded back rising smoothly through the surface. It too declined sharply under many of the same pressures. Yet, unlike the baiji, it still survives. Protected reserves, translocated populations, stronger regulation, and broader conservation attention have all been used to improve its chances. In some areas, recent surveys suggest cautious signs of stability or local recovery. Among the places still carrying the legacy is the Tianzhou Oxbow Nature Reserve. While conceived as a refuge for the baiji, it now helps protect the Yangtze finless porpoise. The Yangtze itself has also seen major restoration efforts in recent decades. Pollution controls, habitat protection, and fishing bans have begun to change parts of the river once again. Not back to what it was, but not unchanged. The baiji cannot be brought back by cleaner waters or quieter channels. If it is truly gone, that branch of the whale family tree ended forever. But extinction does not have to be the only story the river tells. To protect the Yangtze today is not only to preserve what survives, it is also to honour what was lost. I hope you enjoyed this journey into the baiji. If you're interested in the research behind this episode, you can find a document with image credits and sources in the description below. These videos take a great deal of time and research to produce. They will always remain free to watch. But if you would like to support the channel and gain access to new videos a little earlier, you can find a link to my Patreon below as well. If this video sparked your curiosity, don't let it stop here. Share it, talk about it, and keep learning. There's still so much to discover about the world's rare and remarkable species. And the more we understand, the better our chances of protecting them. Thanks for watching.